Welcome back to Paranormal Perspective. I'm John Lorden, and joining me as always is...
Christy Arnhart.
This is the show where Christy looks into a paranormal or paranormal adjacent topic. She does all the research, she presents the case to me, I try to apply, she then levitates.
None of that went right. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. She makes her case, I try to apply some critical thinking, sometimes a little on-the-spot research, and we do this in front of a live audience who votes and then decides who's winning that topic. So, Christy, what is the topic that we're talking about today?
Today, we'll be discussing the mysterious death of Indian paranormal investigator Gaurav Tiwari.
Gaurav Tiwari. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just bring up, I misplaced my window for the audience. Come on out. Get over here, guys. What's the question that we're going to be putting to them?
Do you think a spirit killed Tiwari? And it's Tiwari.
Tiwari. Tiwari. Did a spirit kill Tiwari? Yes or no? Well, sad to know that we're talking about a person's death.
It is. And I wouldn't showcase something like this on the show if I really didn't feel like there was something supernatural to it.
Yeah. I did just look at one of the titles on one of the videos you sent, and it's obvious that this is a person that appreciated and investigated paranormal themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
So Tiwari was actually an ordained minister of the Metaphysical Church of Humanistic Science. That is a lot to say.
Yeah.
Reverend Tiwari was a certified paranormal investigator and a UFO field investigator.
Okay.
So many shows and so many investigations. It's just, seriously, wow, this man did a lot. And it started out in I don't know if it's an odd way or not, but it started out unusually. In 2003, Tiwari was training to be a commercial pilot in Texas, and the school had set him up in an apartment with 4 other people that they would share while they were going to the school. Now, while he was there studying, him and his roommates started to notice that things were moving around the house. They were hearing whispers, and voices, and footsteps that nobody could explain. It happened so long that Tiwari put up cameras. He tried every trick that he could to catch somebody doing this or to figure out what was making the noises, and he was never able to. And it actually caused an identity crisis because it called into question his beliefs and what he had been taught all of his life. So he never really quit studying this. In 2009, he returned to India, where he completed a certified paranormal investigator course, which sounds awesome.
I was just going to say, they have certifications on, they have a certified course
if they
for that?
do, I need to check into this. I want to see what this is all about. That year, sorry, I have a cat here. That year, he also set up the Indian Paranormal Society. So over the years, just listen to this, he visited 6,000 different locations across the world.
Wow.
That are haunted. It shaped his research on the paranormal, and it also gave him a deep sense of empathy. He was known to say, do not disrespect the dead. Just don't. And he's right. Especially when we don't really understand what's happening there. So even in the U.S.
That's a lot of work. 6,000. He doesn't look like he's that old. Do you know how old he is?
He's not.
When he passed away?
He was 32 years old when he passed away.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Was his family loaded? I mean, you got to be traveling around a lot for 6,000 visits.
No, and I'll get into that too.
Okay.
He's been on 80 different investigations just here in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
We've got a clip here from one of the investigations that he did. If you start it at 1 minute, 24 seconds, it'll show you some of the evidence that he caught.
I don't. Okay, it's got to be this other one because that one's only 1 minute long. All right, so 1 minute and somewhere around here.
India's first paranormal organization called Indian Paranormal Society. Sensing he may have caught something during his spirit photography session, Gaurav reviews the results at Surveillance Central.
What's that?
Looks like a humanoid shape. Well, there's someone standing here.
Zooming in, they discover someone or something is definitely lurking in the darkness.
And I see a full body apparition or a human being standing there, but there was no human being as such.
Yeah, I can definitely make out the shape. It does look like it's someone standing, you know, looking straight ahead. So what we need to...
Yeah, so we got like pretty much Ghost Hunters type vibe. Looks like he's using some of the same approach that they are. Yeah, that picture is pretty compelling, and I appreciate, at least with his perspective on it, that he's saying like, you know, yeah, that's either a person or it's like the form of a person out there. They're then countering that information, you know, by saying that there was no one, which gets a little tricky for me on these instances because like it looks like some type of industrial complex they're at. Like, is there security guards that work there? Yeah, it's a curious form, that's for sure. You know, looks on par with stuff that I see Zach do.
Yeah. And I mean, he was on so many shows here in the US too. He was on an MTV ghost hunting show.
Yeah.
Several others. Yeah. He was good at what he did. And he had even like broke his leg horribly before that and insisted on doing the investigation anyway. Now, the next one that we have is only about a minute long. And I really put it up there just so we could see him in action, because this is one of the rare instances where they just recorded him in India doing a sound exorcism.
Okay, let's take a look. Now, it's interesting hearing that he's doing an exorcism, because that's something that I don't think that I've seen Zach Baggins do. I know I've seen him try to do some cleansing methods, but nothing I would call an exorcism necessarily.
And I don't really think that it was a demonic type entity. I think it was just an entity, and they use exorcism a little differently than what we do.
Yeah, I mean, the background noise to me sounds like there's a television or something on. Like there's something there's some other soundtrack that's going on underneath this. It's almost unfortunate that they've added the music. Like, just leave the music out.
Yeah, I know. I didn't want the music either.
Yeah. I mean, it almost sounds like someone watching a sports show or something. I hear a little run of musical trumpets that are happening in the background.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not his official. That can't be his official. It was only 892, but someone is using his material apparently and getting a bunch of views off it. Interesting. Okay. All right.
So that'll give you an idea of what he did. You know,
Yeah.
he used methods that we don't all use over here, but he was really respected. I mean, he worked very hard at this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as in cases like this, it doesn't bring in a lot of money. He was always making just enough to get by on. And that ended up causing tension, because as a lot of you know, in these cultures, the children are expected to come up and do better and have better jobs and bring more money into the family to care for their elders. And because he wasn't able to do that, his father, Uday, was the one who had to take up most of the burden for that. And it caused some tension in the family. But he got married to a lovely young lady. He married her at the first of the year in 2016. That's what it is.
Okay.
And this is sad because July is when all of this went down. On July 7th of 2016, Warev's either 31 or 32. I see some differing, reports on the exact age, but 31 or 32. His team from IPS were investigating a suspected haunted house in West Delhi's Janakpuri neighborhood.
Okay.
A couple who was living there saw images of a baby girl moving in and out of their living room and their bedroom, and it scared the crap out of them. So they called Gaurav, and after a difficult 8-hour investigation, they were able to cleanse the house and expel the spirit. So by this point, it's into the next day, early morning. He gets home at 2 a.m. Now, at 4 a.m., his family reported that he woke up. I guess he couldn't sleep. So he did some yoga, and then he laid back down and went to sleep until the next morning. He had been checking his email on his phone, puttering around the house that morning. And at about 11 a.m., he went into his bathroom. Now, as soon as he went in, the family heard a thud, like something had dropped and hit the floor.
Yeah.
And then it sounded like someone was trying to work the latch in the bathroom, the lock for it. And they said that this lock was rusty. So they were not surprised to hear noises like that. They thought he was having trouble locking or unlocking the door. They weren't thinking anything about this. Until an hour later, when he still hadn't come out of the bathroom. So his wife walked up to the door, and she looked in through the little window on the door, and she saw Gaurav on the floor. They were unable to get through, so a neighbor came in and actually busted the door down. They found Gaurav on the floor. He was sweating a lot. His eyes were bulging, and he was gasping for breath. Naturally, they called the police and rushed him to the hospital. An hour and a half later, before he could be intubated, he died. Which is sad. I don't know why it took an hour and a half anyway. That's too long. He couldn't breathe. Now, when an autopsy looked over this to find out how he had died, they called it death due to asphyxia. They couldn't show that anybody had done this to him. His trachea wasn't crushed or his windpipe wasn't crushed like it usually is when you're strangled, when you hang yourself, something like that. But he had died from asphyxia. So after a short investigation, the police they just say it's a suicide. It's suicide. He hanged himself in the bathroom using his wife's dupatta, which is like a scarf that they wear. But the family didn't see anything around his neck when they opened the door, which I guess I can understand if he had fallen and it had let loose, but he laid in there for an hour trying to breathe and couldn't, and eventually died from it. When they conducted the autopsy, they did note that around his neck was a single black line. They couldn't tell what had caused this line to appear. They just assumed it was somehow part of the suicide. They didn't really look into it any further, and they won't. You've got a paranormal investigator who's died mysteriously, and people are crying, oh, well, he could have been murdered. It could have been a spirit and all of this. So the police shut it down real quick and just said, no, he died by his own hand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that Gaurav was known to say pretty often was that when you're dealing with malevolent spirits, there are times that you will see black lines, say in photography, like they did in The Omen, when the photographer would take pictures and there would be like X's or lines through them, and then those people would die. Yeah, he would talk about that and how that does happen. So naturally, when word got out about the black line across his neck, everybody assumed that it was a malevolent spirit that had taken his life. Now, before his death, Tiwari Gaurav had told his wife that a negative force was pulling him toward the negative force. He had said he was trying to control it, but seemed unable to do so. His wife was not happy with him, so she ignored it and just didn't tell anybody about it. She assumed that the feelings were because he was feeling so pressured. She did not want him to be a paranormal investigator, and I don't know why she thought that would change after she married him, but she didn't want him to do that.
I mean, that's kind of a common thing with marriages. Like, there's a lot of women that go into marriages thinking I'm going to change him. He'll change for me. It's because he loves me so
No.
much that he'll get a regular job. And,
No, they
yeah,
never change. Love them for who they are when you marry them, because that's who you got,
it's good advice.
you
It's
know?
good advice. Yeah.
But yeah, she was. She was
Yeah.
upset about the money. Her parents were upset about the money. Now he's talking about feeling an oppressive force on him, and she just really didn't care about any of it.
We have a viewer, Sarah, that is actually bringing up a really interesting
Mm.
point about a possible allergic reaction, and if he had some type of known allergies or something that might have
Not
caused that.
anywhere that I could find. And
Yeah,
it
and
doesn't.
I would just say that they would probably, when they were doing the autopsy, they would probably look for indicators of things like that, and
Mhm.
at least the official word that I'm just kind of spot checking some things as Christy's going here. The official word is that they think that he did this to himself, that he ended his own life.
Mhm.
Specifically, at least the Wikipedia is saying hanging himself inside his bathroom, which
I know.
yeah, is kind of
I
weird. But we've heard of several different people that have died in the bathroom, usually
Mhm.
using some type of item in the door or on the doorknob or something like that.
Mhm. Which is, which it just brings back to me that the family was like, well, there wasn't anything around his neck. They didn't see anything that jumped out at them right off the bat.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean it's not there, but
right. That's a little tricky too, because you don't know the timing in terms of when's his family interacting in that room with somewhere. Because the first thing that the first person through the door is going to do is try to remove them. As a matter of fact, I mean, this is reminding me of the Elisa Gomez case, right? The first thing that
Mhm.
someone's going to try to do is a life-saving effort. So if you do see
Mhm.
him hanging by something and they think there's any chance of him still being alive, whatever those conditions are going to change within seconds of that door being
Mhm.
open. So it's hard to know without the specifics of, his wife. Was she the one that found him? She was the one that found him, right?
Yeah. Yeah, she saw him through the window.
Yeah, so you would need some, statement from her about exactly what she saw upon entering and how she handled the scene and stuff like that. Because
Mhm.
it's a pretty common thing I run into with the cases that we deal with in terms of true crime, that family members will show up with these very strong conclusions about the scene, and they are not taking into account that time has passed. There's been multiple people through this scene already. Sometimes there's been a response that has happened from first responders, and they're showing
Mhm.
up. So yeah, it's a little tricky on that front. The black line is interesting, and I'm trying to find more information on that, and I'm just finding kind of mentions of it, but nothing that's
Mhm.
it doesn't seem tied to any official record that I can quite find. Did you find a copy of the autopsy?
Nope.
Yeah.
No. And it coming from India, I don't expect to.
Yeah.
I have I have hard it's a h- yeah. You have a hard time finding information from India, especially stuff you can trust,
Yeah.
because I've seen some doozies out there. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
that's
wouldn't
another thing. I won't
expect.
when I'm looking into the cases that I look into on the Lord and Arch channel,
Mhm.
I've tried to look at sources from India newspapers. Journalism out there is not in a spot where I'm very trustworthy of those sources. It's kind of
Yeah.
almost yellow journalism a little bit. There's a lot of information that doesn't quite get represented in the same way. I can find
Mhm.
almost straight up conflicting information sometimes with Indian news sources. It's tough.
And this time I didn't find conflicting reports. I've got firstpost.com India Today, Man's World India, DNA India.
Yeah.
Those were some of the sources. But
Yeah,
I wouldn't
here
expect them.
I'm looking at India Today too, and they're saying um he was recently married, had no financial problems, no pressing issues, nothing that could have driven him to done this to himself. So even the
Well,
story you're telling us, compared, and I'm just doing this to highlight that these sources are really, really there. It's hard to find the information that you can really lean on with some of these sources.
and it isn't, I mean, he was making money, but he was not making the amount of money that his wife and his family wanted him to make.
Yeah, well, there's a few things that my brain gets twisted up on there. First of all, not just the paranormal hunting aspect, because outside of having like a show or some type of format where you're able to monetize what you do in terms of paranormal
Mhm.
hunting, I don't think people really make money working in those terms of paranormal. Like
No.
I've never heard a story of some family saying, our house is haunted and we're going to pay for a bunch of experts to come into our house. Like, I just don't
Yeah,
hear that.
no.
I hear about,
Mm-mm.
oh, we reached out to a college, we found someone that had this interest, they knew someone that was an investigator, those investigators came in, but never, there's no form of monetization. Nowadays, like, if you're going to do a TikTok or YouTube channel or something like that, at least you can monetize in that way if you're doing that type of content. But there was a few points in the story that you told us about him where he was talking about doing cleansing. And what I'm wondering is, for in India in particular, could that be almost like a parallel stream in terms of, you know, I'm a paranormal investigator, but I also do cleansing. And if you guys think that you're being haunted to the point of you're having bad luck, your life isn't going great or something like that, I'll come out and do a cleanse, something like we saw that he was doing.
Mhm.
Is that a billable thing? Is that something
Well,
where he
if it
could
is,
actually...
I didn't find any evidence of anything like that.
Yeah. But even outside of that, just the belief of I'm going and I'm doing these types of cleansings, could that have added to his pressure in some way of what he was thinking about himself personally? And then, of course, life change, going into a marriage, hearing that his wife wasn't really big on that career path, knowing that his family wasn't big on that career path. Everyone was expecting him to kind of grow out of this and change into something else. There's just a lot of risk indicators, you know, for him kind of ending his own life, unfortunately.
Well, there's a lot of risk indicators for a malevolent entity to enter his life too, with the turmoil that he had, the reservations his family had, what he was dealing with all of the time. They even said that before he died, you know, he and his wife had been in a big argument again about money. And I think that left him open to something that he had touched in an investigation before. I know the police ruled it a suicide, and it very well could have been. I'm not going to say it wasn't, but they can't explain the mark. They can't tell you what was around his neck. They're assuming it was her scarf. I just cannot get this straight in my head. If he was fumbling at the door at 11 o'clock, shortly after he went in there, then like I said, he was in there for an hour. He was in there for an hour slowly dying.
Yeah.
Is that because he had can a person literally do that to themselves? Was it just that he had lost consciousness? And even though he was alive when they said his eyes were protruding, so they were obviously open. I mean, it seems to me like he was conscious for a lot of this, and I can't imagine somebody going to this much trouble for that long.
Yeah. It's really difficult because we don't have an accurate description of the scene and the method, and even to the point of them, you know, the authorities wanting to say that he did this to himself. Why didn't they release the information that was kind of like, okay, here's how obvious it was. He was found in this way, this item was found in this position, case closed.
They struck me as just not really caring enough to put it all out there.
Well,
because
that,
you know, a lot of that's sad.
Yeah,
his life meant more than that, and people have questions. I mean, his paranormal team firmly believes that something else had a hand in this, even if he did hang himself. When you have those oppressive entities on you, giving you those thoughts, leading you into things all the time, who knows what happened in there? We don't know.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for, and this is where it's really hard, because I think there's a line between, you can have almost something within yourself that is a negative entity, you know, and there's several different ways that can manifest. And there's several different reasons for that to occur. So trying to find that dividing line about, no, it was something outside of him versus no, it was something inside of him. That's where it gets really tough. It would have been a whole different story if he comes home and something happens to his wife. If there was some aspect of, there was something on the external that attached to him because of his type of work, and then it got into his home and it affected his home life in that type of way.
That could have very well happened. And it could have even be that this is something he picked up in an investigation and had just been slowly working on him.
Yeah.
Those kind of things happen too.
It's hard to know, but it's hard to ignore the risk factors that we're talking about just general depression. Like this guy, seemed like he was getting some attention. He was obviously in a field that he cared about immensely. If he had injured his leg so badly and then he's off ghost hunting that night, like his passion for it is obvious and strong. So knowing that there was pressure on him to get out of that, coupled up with that type of life change where, you're rolling into, sometimes just that life change, like people freak out in marriages sometimes. They do. Yeah. Especially when they're new, like, because all of a sudden there's a bunch of changes and, oh wait, this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't how I thought this was going to be. Like, I think that's a pretty regular reaction that most people have at the start of marriage. That's like the start of the work, essentially. It's like, oh wait, we have to refigure things out in a different way now. So yeah, it's hard. I can't find the line for myself on this one. The audience is at a 61%. They don't think it's a spirit necessarily. There's 40% that are saying it's possible. But this is another one of those stories where I don't feel good about touting some kind of win. It's too vague. It's not in a spot where I feel comfortable that, like, I've presented the information to knock it down, or that you've presented the information to, like, overwhelmingly, push me in the other direction. I'm at the spot where whoever is law enforcement that's handling this did not do this case justice in terms of not releasing the information that could have really helped back their claims. But understandable that the autopsy shouldn't just be all of a sudden created and put out into the public realm. If we are talking about a self-harm situation, this should be respected in terms of his family and what they're going through and those details. Not being kicked around and some random guy on the street yelling details at them about how their son died or something like that. So, or some random voice on the internet, kind of piping up about that. So, yeah. So I'm pretty content to not take a win on this one. I think that's how I think. What do you think, Christy?
I do. I think something was pressing on him. I do.
Oh, I know something was pressing on him.
Yeah, but I think it was. I don't think it was just the pressures that were. I think something else, like a malevolent entity, was helping this along.
Yeah,
I really do.
Yeah, we got some comments here.
But no, I'm satisfied.
Yeah,
with the way it's voted. Yeah.
Raven is saying, I think something strange happened for sure. I don't know that it was a spirit, but it needs more attention and investigation. That's the thing that's unfortunate about this. I don't know that we'll see more details about it. We're 8 years after the fact at this point.
Yeah. No, I think everyone's just pretty much put this behind them at that point.
Yeah. Debbie's asking, could it have been some type of drug that he took or a narcotic of some kind? That it's just more reasoning for more information. I'm sure that, well, I'm not sure. I would like to hope that they ran some type of toxicology, but again, we're not going to find the answer.
Yeah, we're not. They didn't mention anything, but that doesn't mean that they didn't. I don't know.
It is, it's sad that it's sad to me on two fronts. It's sad to always hear about a loss of life. That's part of what motivates us to do the work we do, and as much of it as we do. But it's also sad to me to hear about his potentially his dream dying, being part of that, because it seems like he was really on a track that he loved. So.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, so Gaurav, this episode's for you, and we hope you are on the other side, and maybe we'll get to meet you someday. So feel pretty good ending the episode on that note. Christy, thank you so much for all your hard work on today's episode. We always appreciate it, and thank you for hanging out with us. Please join us again next week for another episode of Paranormal Perspective.